Hello and welcome to my guide to the Twin Ogron in Highmaul. This guide is for normal and heroic mode. Now this is a fun enough boss fight that's mainly just based on your situational awareness and understanding the abilities that the bosses do. Let's just jump right into the fight and talk about what these guys do. So first of all, if the bosses are far apart from each other, they will deal more damage and cast faster. This stuff isn't good, so you want to tank these bosses together, so both tanks will stack them up. Bar two scenarios that I'll explain in a bit. Now each boss has got a energy bar which will tick up over the duration of the fight. One boss starts at 90 energy and the other boss starts at 0 energy. They each do special abilities at 33, 66 and 100 energy, so the initial energy disparity between the bosses means that the order of abilities and things like that and how the abilities clash will vary throughout the fight. This means that the best overall strategy is just to have every raider in a situation where they completely understand the 4 abilities that each of these bosses does. Well, really 3, because one ability of each boss is just a simple tank one. Now let's talk about Famos. So his tank ability is called Double Smash. It just causes him to do a bit more damage than his regular attacks. It's not that bad. At 33% though, he does Whirlwind. This does AoE damage in a pretty large radius, and it should be kited away to a preset location by the tank who's assigned to that boss. If you're a healer, then you do want to watch out for the damage that tank will take though. Whirlwind will also apply a debuff that increases your damage taken from Pulp's tank ability, which essentially means that it's just one tank to one boss throughout the fight. If you're a melee player, then you do want to watch out for Whirlwind, as you will get hit by the initial ticks if you're slow when it comes to moving away from the boss. Next, at 66%, he will do Enfeebling Roar. This increases the damage taken by players within 20 yards of Famos by 300%, spread amongst each player. So in our raid, when we all stacked up within the 20 yards, we got about a 26% damage taken increase debuff, which is certainly a lot nicer than 300. If people don't stack up for this, then the tanks are going to take a ludicrous amount of damage and end up dying, so when he's doing Enfeebling Roar, all stack up on the bosses and you should be fine. Next, at 100 energy, Famos will do Quake, which also causes something called Blaze. This causes 2 burning weapons to drop from the ceiling to the floor. Fire will then start to come out of these and move around the room. If you stand in the fire, you will get a stacking dot that's applied to you, and it really does do a lot of damage. It's vitally important that you avoid these flames, as the healers will already be stressed enough. Ranged players can actually cheese this by standing behind the burning weapons, as they don't seem to send that much fire in a outwards direction. They mainly send the fire in towards the bosses and the melee. Now that's really it for Famos' abilities. Pulls aren't actually as bad. Famos definitely seems to be the guy that's got the most mechanical complexity or, difficulty when it comes to this fight. So then, for Pulp, he does Shield Bash, which is just his tank ability. It hits the tank decently hard, and it also interrupts the tank, which is kind of odd because, well, tanks generally don't do spellcasting. Anyway, at 33 energy, he will do Shield Charge. This will cause him to charge at someone, and then knock back anyone within that path. Now, the damage that this does is increased based on the distance that he's travelled, and then once he reaches his target location, he does a 10-yard AoE and a knockback. If you get hit, then you take an 18-second bleed. This bleed does quite a lot of damage, and it really does suck in combination with, say, the fire dot from Famos. You just really want to ensure that when shield charge is about to happen, you look at the boss, you see where he's going to charge, and then you make sure that you don't get hit. I actually messed this up a few times throughout the fight, which was, well, totally a problem on my part. Now next, at 66% energy, he will do Interrupting Shout. This will do about, I think, 40 to 50,000 damage base anyway to everyone in the raid, and also interrupt casting for 6 seconds if you let it interrupt you. So, if you're a healer especially, make sure that you don't get interrupted by this, because it will really hurt you not being able to heal for 6 seconds. Then finally, at 100 energy, he does Pulverize. This causes him to whack the ground 3 times. On the first hit, basically, it does damage to everyone in the raid, and it does damage within a 3-yard radius of every single player. This means that if you're all stacked up, then you're going to take a crazy amount of damage, so you need to be in a 3-yard spread for the very first hit of Pulverize. Now for the second one, he will knock some larger chunks of rock off the ceiling, and you'll just see some spell effects on the floor. Simply just don't stand on the spell effects and you'll be fine. Then finally, he will hit it for a 3rd time, which causes a massive chunk to fall from the ceiling, and this will deal raid-wide damage based on how close you are to the point of impact. Now with that said, all you really need to do is ensure that you're not inside the spell effect of this ability. So that's really it for what these bosses do, and strategy-wise, this is more just a matter of understanding and then being able to adapt on the fly to what's going on. As long as everyone understands what the various abilities do, then you should actually be fine. It's not really a set-in-stone thing, but anyway, I will talk a little bit about strategy. So first of all, tank the bosses in the middle, and then put down a raid marker where the tank who is tanking Famos takes him during Whirlwind. No one should go there just to ensure that, well, nobody gets hit by Whirlwind. Other than that though, as I said, all you need to do is understand the abilities. As the boss's energy levels are offset, the fight doesn't play out in the exact same way every time. So the most important bit of advice, which is just a catch-all to understand every single ability clash, is just to know what the abilities are, and then roughly watch the boss's energy bars, or at least have some sort of, well, obviously like a boss add-on to help you with that. Now positioning-wise, as I said, we took them in the middle, and then also had range stand back around one of the outer circles. This was pretty good actually. Certainly from a range player, I felt like I was always close enough to stack up when I needed to, and the healer seemed pretty happy with that setup. And that's really it in terms of positioning. Now, time to talk about just a few ability clashes, I suppose. When Quake happens, you need to be super careful about the fire. It's really one of the most important things in this fight. The ability of most classes to heal on the move was reduced in Warlords of Draenor, making this pretty hard to deal with for the healers. You shouldn't be needlessly hit by the fire, as it just puts on even more stress, and honestly getting this right and decreasing our fire damage is pretty much what got us the kill, because we messed it up in our first 2 or 3 attempts, and then once we got it better, the boss was so much easier from a healing perspective. If you're a ranged player, stand behind the weapons to make life a little bit easier for yourself. Then on top of that, everyone should stack whenever Enfeebling Roar happens so that the damage buff is spread out. While you are stacked up, you're going to be more vulnerable to some of the other boss moves though. For an example, if you're all stacked up for Enfeebling Roar and then the boss does Pulverize, you're in a bit of bother because, well, Enfeebling Roar requires you to be stacked, yet Pulverize requires you to be in a 3-yard spread. Getting that right can be really hard, and I suppose just a bit of practice is really what's going to serve you best there, and maybe a healing cooldown if there is one to spare. Now, we also had a bit of a fun time when the third hit of Pulverize, which is the giant raid-wide AoE one, came just before Enfeebling Roar. Now, when this happens, I recommend standing outside the effect of the Pulverize hit, and then running up to the boss as soon as possible to ensure that you soak the stacks. We didn't do a particularly good job of this, though. Anyway, that's really it in terms of the hyper-scary sort of clashes of abilities. The rest of the fight is honestly just common sense, so read up, execute it decently, have your head screwed on, and this should not be a very hard fight. It only took us like 40 or 50 minutes from our very first attempt to get a kill, so you should be grand. Anyway, that's it for me. Thanks for watching the guide, and I'll see you next time.